Edward Jones, making sense of investing.
Now, here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
All right, we've had Doug Gottlieb on many times, Fox Sports. A lot of it, of course, recently with what Baylor was doing in basketball on their way to what eventually became a national championship. So, Doug, I'm trying to play this very rare during the week, if ever, round of golf this morning, and I am told that you stirred up society. Is that right, Paul? Isn't that what you told me?
I think
Doug Gottlieb.
Yeah, Colt Barber sent us a message, and after that, had to go listen, and it was quite the epic rant, Doug.
All right, so Doug, your thoughts about what's going on in college football?
Well, I'm not allowed to. It was on satellite radio, so there's some choice words. I just thought it's not just the OU in Texas leaving the league and being bullcrap. It's the way in which it was done. You know, I mean, if what you're doing is the right thing, then you don't have to hide anything, right? Like Texas was well within their rights when their grant of rights is up in 25. If they want to leave the league, they're allowed to. Why do you have to do it under cover of darkness? And then after like 6 months of planning, terrible business. And Oklahoma, shame on them. What you have to know about the relationship with Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, it's different than Texas and Texas A&M or Texas and Baylor, right? They've been together in the same league since 1920. And the rivalry spans all sports. I mean, baseball sells out in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. Golf's a little bit of rivalry. Wrestling's always been good. Women's basketball is decent. Basketball is very good. And obviously football is a one-sided affair. But I mean, even the most ardent OU homer would point out that over the last 15 years, or even last decade, really, Oklahoma State is the biggest challenger in the Big 12. It's more about Texas's incompetence than it is about anything else, you know? I thought Max Line was a great one, right? It was a really good zinger, which was, it wasn't about Texas thinking too much of themselves, but thinking not enough of themselves. Like, I don't really, I actually don't, I understand what it does to your bars and restaurants, and, that instead of having Kansas State and TCU come to Austin, and Iowa State come to Austin, now you have LSU and you have Alabama and you have Auburn, and I mean, you also have there's Vandy and Mississippi State and Kentucky and Missouri are still in the league now. So it's not like everybody on there is world beaters that's going to fill up your bars and restaurants and hotels. But it's definitely a different cast, bigger schools, wider net, etc. But does Texas know that they let the wolf into the hen house? Right? Do they understand that they were used? They do get it, right? Like, hey, we like your brand. ESPN was failing with the Longhorn Network, but now all those schools can recruit Texas and say, "Hey, we don't just play A&M. We'll play OU. We play Texas. You can go away from home and still come back home and play." So, but I just think the way in which it was handled, specifically by OU, I thought it's a terrible snapshot of the inherent greed in college sports.
Doug, one of the things that stuck out to me is when we talked to Mac the other day about, and it mentioned also by Bob Bowlesby and several others, is that during this whole time, Texas and OU clearly had a problem, but they didn't make one bit of effort to make things better. When the league could have expanded, they didn't want to do that. They didn't want, Texas didn't want to make concessions on the Longhorn Network. So it feels like this is, even though it was 6 months, that maybe not the specific idea of this was there, but they always wanted to leave. Do you get that feeling?
I don't know. I don't know. I think, honestly, if Texas is winning and competing for national championships, I would guess none of this happens, and that they're recruiting school. They're trying to recruit Arkansas back into the league. I don't know enough about it. I mean, I know Chris Del Conte. I mean, here's a weird fact that nobody knows. My brother and Chris were roommates at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo for their first job. Chris was an associate athletic director. My brother was an assistant coach at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. So I know Del Conte forever, and I find him to be an incredibly engaging, fun dude. And I think he's done a really good job, despite the fact that, his recent hires hasn't worked. Now he's got another shot out of here, football and basketball. And I love Joe C. I mean, Joe C's as good as they are. I think this honestly goes above their pay grade. This is a president thing. And, the last president of Texas wanted to be in California, wanted to be part of the Pac-12. These guys, they want to feel like they're big time. I think, look, there's an upside to it for sure with the schools that are going to be coming in and being associated with the best college football conference in the country. The downside to it is, people have been catering to Texas for no other reason than they're Texas for a long time. You do know that the headquarters of the SEC are in Birmingham, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a different deal now. If you think that you're going to have nearly the pull, which is weird, right? Like they could have, it kind of what you're saying, they could have dictated some terms here a little bit more and really could have made it, it was already their league financially, but could have made it even more so. And they chose not to do so. And that's great. But the idea of everybody says, hey, I want to be part of an ensemble cast. That's what you are now in the SEC. You're part of the ensemble. You're not the star. And I will be interested to see how that works for the egos in Austin. That'll be a fascinating one.
Do you think, and of course we don't know the details of this, but do you think this was Texas's plan or Oklahoma's?
I think this is ESPN's plan. Look, they're a business, okay, and their business is struggling right now. And what are their two most vital businesses that are actually making money, right? SEC, and they have a big new deal with them, and the college football playoff is a win for them, but it hasn't been they not getting Texas involved. They haven't gotten those big numbers or whatever. But if you're going to expand the college football playoff, and it's going to be on ESPN. And you're going to expand, you have this big new deal. How do you profit the most? You load up on it. And, by the way, you can write it off the loss of the conference. You can write that off with the Longhorn Network, or you can somehow, morph it into the SEC or whatever. But I think this is an ESPN plan. This is Jimmy Pitaro trying to figure out, like, all right, how do I fix this? How do I get out of this Longhorn Network deal? How do I fix this deal? And remember, they don't have as many of the Big 12, college football games anymore, so that's not of value to them. They have everything in the SEC coming up in this new deal, so they just. I think it's on the surface a very smart plan. The problem with it is now you pissed off everybody else in college football, and for the college football college football, you love it, I love it. Everybody in the Big 12 and the SEC, we're into it. Okay, but when you have Clemson and Alabama and teams in the South every year, like that's NASCAR. There's not growth there. Those may be growing markets, but that's not where the TV viewers are. You got to get SC and Notre Dame and the Big Ten, but you got to get SC. You got to get the West. Nobody on the other side of the country cares about college football once you get to the playoff because it's become sort of irrelevant, and this is pushing it more towards irrelevance. And I understand that's not the fault of the SEC, okay, but it does kind of all work together. And if it becomes even more of a regional sport, this thing could backfire. And what you've done again by upsetting the apple cart, you run the risk. Everybody right now is like, hey, let's just slow down with the college football playoff. Let's not let the SEC get everything. And I think it's a kind of a smart sort of pushback against what ESPN's doing. And remember, again, part of this is TV companies. Fox, who I work for, they got the Big Ten, so they're sitting there going like, oh, hold on, we don't have the college football playoff. We're not just gonna let this thing happen organically and let you profit more off it. Let's slow down and figure this thing out.
Doug, you obviously went to Oklahoma State, and there's 8 teams that are right now sitting there trying to figure out their football lives, and we've had pretty much representatives of almost every one of the various schools or whatever, and we're here in Waco. Obviously, Baylor's seriously affected by this. Do you think that these 8 teams will find a way, no matter what, to survive?
I do. I mean, look, is there an amount of pessimism that it can go to some dark places, right? Like, joining the AAC is not what you want. You know, I mean, you're talking about cutting sports. You're talking about, I mean, just it's a different sport. And I mean, you know, for Baylor, coming off what they've been able to do basketball wise after what they had built football wise, and I think are back on the plan of building it the right way football wise, that one would hurt. The thing that I'm impressed by is I do think, for example, Mac is part of a group. There's some smart guys there, right? There's some guys that like, all right, let's figure it's a problem. Let's figure it out. And I think the PAC is the best answer there. An alliance with the PAC is probably the best one. You know, the question is, can you get Colorado and Utah either back into the conference or just into some sort of alliance for college football? And then you have 10 on each side, you know, and you play 9 games on the Midwest side or whatever you want to call it with the Big 12. You play 9, you know, you play everybody in your conference round robin, then you play like 2 crossover games. So people can still get out west, and frankly, so all the schools can get to Texas. And I think it solves a lot of problems for the Pac-12. I think it solves a lot of problems for the Big 12. And I think it makes it a viable TV entity with that volume of games. Because remember, the value in college sports, is it ratings? Yes. It's a solid ratings base. But it also is, you got to provide a volume of a decent number. And I think it would provide that because, look, if you add teams, if you're saying, hey, like Pac-12, add us, like, okay, that means that for every team you add, their TV deal has to increase by $35-40 million per year. Yeah, remember, then if you're adding 4 teams, you're talking about what, $120 to $150 million. Does Oklahoma State and Texas Tech and Baylor and TCU, again, that's your dream scenario, you just all the 4 of those teams. Does that math work? I don't know. I don't know if that same value works. But the other side to it is like, look, the secret about the Pac-12, people make it out like, you know, their past commissioner was an idiot. The truth is that the Pac-12 is not a great TV product, not because they're not great schools. They have a huge problem, and that's the time zone. You can't play a 7:00 game on the West Coast and hope to get any sort of number in the Central and Eastern time zone. This would alleviate that problem, and those schools want to get into Texas, not just for recruiting and for college football, that's important, but they also want to get into Texas for their student body. You know, they want to continue to expand their horizons. So I think that thing works, and I think you're lucky that you have the Pac-12 that's in need of a jolt. They have a new commissioner that I think is thinking about what's the best way to make this thing work. And I think in the Big 12, you got some smart guys. Bowlesby's done a good job. You know, I think when it immediately happened, I was told, you know, there's a bunch of, hey, let's get rid of Bowlesby. And then they're like, wait a second. If we get rid of Bowlesby, this is a mess. And Bowlesby's done a really nice job of like, hey, all right, let's take a breath. Let's figure it out. Let's band together. Okay, we're going to stay together and collect that big check from OU in Texas because they're leaving this year, right? Nobody walks in and says, hey, I want a divorce in 4 years. You know, that good luck on that one. So I'm pretty sure, 95% sure, this is their last year. They'll have to write some form of check. I'm sure they're going to ask for everything, and they'll want to pay nothing, and the truth will fall somewhere in the middle, right? And then, you know, the Pac-12's got to, you know, they got to make sure they secure USC. USC is in a pretty tough financial spot because of some lawsuits against the university that have nothing to do with athletics. And so they're going to need a jolt. And I think if you can lock in USC to being a part of whatever they plan, then you got a pretty good plan in place. And then you got to figure out, is the SEC done? Is the ACC expanding? Are we going forward as 8? Are we going to add the other 2? You know, what do we want to do? Do they want to be 12 and we be 12? How do we want to look at it? I think these are workable problems, and I do think that Mac's the perfect example. You got a really good AD who can problem solve, and you know, he's not every AD is like that. You know, you got at UCLA. Martin Jarmond is very new. He comes in. He's not even 40 years old. He's a really sharp young guy. You know, can he work with there's some big UCLA alums like a Casey Wasserman. Can he work with those guys in order to solve this problem, because they're, some of these, the thing about the Pac-12 schools, Cal, Stanford, UCLA, academics are actually what's important to their presidents. They don't care about this nonsense, but you have to get the people that do care to explain to them how it benefits them in terms of their school.
Doug, just thinking about it as a basketball conference, though, I can get behind that. There's the Pac-12 and the Big 12.
Hell yeah. That's a great basketball league.
I mean, it's fantastic.
I mean, Arizona, we'll see what Tommy Lloyd does, but UCLA and USC and, Cal and Stanford have been a shell of themselves, but go back and look at the last 20 years. I mean, my brother was at Cal for 6 years. They went to 4 NCAA tournaments. Stanford has been down for the last, 12 years or so, but before that, they were probably the third best program, maybe even the second best program in the Pac-12 for a while. Washington last year was awful, but previous to that, and they've been very, very good. And there's a fertile recruiting crowd. And I think the coaches would love it, because now it opens up California. Look, no matter what anybody says about facilities and conference, like, kids want to play close to home. They just do. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to play for a school close to home, but if you play, if you're, for example, Baylor, and now all of a sudden you won a national championship, you can already recruit in the state of Texas and in Louisiana and all the places you've been able to draw guys to get transfers. And now all of a sudden you can go like, hey, you can come out to Waco, okay, be a part of something special. We're opening up a new arena in a couple of years. You'll get to play in that. And, oh, yeah, by the way, we're going to come out and play in L.A., and because you're on in this Alliance Conference, every game's on in Los Angeles. That's a much better sale than, hey, you're going to play just in Baylor, right? It opens up new recruiting avenues for everybody in the league.
Doug, college football needs a czar. Is ESPN trying to become the czar?
How does the czar work?
Well, they run college football.
Yeah. Well, you got to get rid of Mark Emmert, and you're still going to have the same problem. Whether you have 75 schools or you have 300 schools, everybody's worried about themselves. Everybody has their own problem. So, and then you got Notre Dame's always kind of done their own thing. You got private schools and public schools. ESPN's trying to, you control what you can control. And if we can control an entire conference's, TV package, and it's the best conference, and, oh, yeah, by the way, we control the college football playoff, then, yeah, let's flex our muscles a little bit, I don't know if they're trying to be the czar, but I also don't know. I don't know if they know what they did, because on the surface it looks great, okay? But all it takes is somebody in Silicon Valley to go like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to Apple, because Apple craps money. ESPN's losing money, right? Apple, Netflix, Amazon, Yahoo, Google, Facebook. Any of those ones get involved and say like, hey, we'll partner with CBS or Fox or even Bally's, which is owned by Sinclair, right? Like, partners with one of them, like, ESPN's over. Hey, because all these schools will go wherever the biggest check is. I think it's a really kind of curious time. And then you factor in the fact that cable television is suffering and things are working towards streaming, but streaming is not really making money just yet. But you also have to factor in that all these athletic departments' budgets are off because they didn't have fans last year. So it's a really interesting time. I don't know if ESPN's trying to be the czar. I do think they're trying to control what they can control. It's no different than any other business. Whatever's making money, go into that. Whatever's not, get out of that. Like I have a friend that works at Nike, and Nike, like, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, bought Cole Haan. You remember that? They bought Cole Haan the shoes. Mm-hmm. And then they sold Cole Haan, I'm going to say like 7 or 8 years ago. And so the Cole Haan still have that kind of air soul to it, right? Mm-hmm. And I asked a buddy who works at Nike, he's an executive, I was like, why'd you guys sell Cole Haan? Like, I love those. And he goes, yeah, we only got 8% growth. I was like, that sounds good. Like, now anything less than 12% growth, we're getting rid of.
Wow.
Like, wow. That's how real business works, and, they're leaning into what business they feel like works, and college football kind of works for them. And, they also need a volume because, they want to control things on that ESPN Plus app. so that they feel like you have to pay. Right now it's $5, but next year it'll be $6, and the year after that it'll be $7, and so on, because you feel like if you want to watch a game wherever you are, you got to press that button.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Doug Gottlieb, Fox Sports, has been with us with our show many times, including, as I mentioned, not just the run that Baylor had, but other years as well, but in the last 18 months or so. And I know he's very passionate. Some of you even either on the chat and text line. The text line, we get a lot of business, a lot of responses from you as well. I saw some things about how you feel about Doug. Some that were very personal. I'll say this. Just because you don't like somebody's opinion about a specific type topic, or maybe it's about your team or a favorite player, you want to get personal? Why? Because there may be something he says in 2 months that might be something you agree with. I don't know. I've never understood that. You can say you don't like his opinion. You can tell him to shut up. You say, but then some of you want to get personal with him, and he has discussed his past in the open many times. That's just me to tell you, because some of you don't need to sometimes feel like you will live a perfect life. I don't understand that. I understand it's a message board, it's a chat room. I'm just saying, because you don't like his opinion, you want to then bring up and drudge up some things from his past when he has discussed that personally in open candidness. Yeah, I don't get it. Why? Because you wouldn't want that with you. Nor would I want that for you. SicEm365 Radio.
If you are looking